Welcome to the deep dive. We know you want to get smart, fast, without wading through mountains of text.
Exactly. Information overload is real.
So today we're tackling a really fundamental topic, organizational behavior. We're aiming to give you the essentials, quick and clear.
Yep. We've gone through quite a bit of academic material, core principles, the disciplines that feed into OB. It's history, individual stuff, group dynamics.
Leadership, stress, change, even the international angle, all the big pieces.
Right. Our mission basically is to pull out the core insights for you.
So you walk away knowing what organizational behavior, or OB, actually is, and maybe more importantly, why it matters in, well, pretty much any organization.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. At its heart, what are we talking about with OB?
Well, fundamentally, organizational behavior is about understanding human behavior in organizational settings.
Okay.
It really zooms in on that interplay between, the nature of people, what we bring to the table, and the nature of the organizations themselves.
The people and the place, essentially.
Kind of like figuring out the human puzzle within that structured environment. Yeah.
Okay, let's break that down. Nature of people. What does that cover?
So nature of people refers to those core qualities individuals bring. First off, individual differences. This is huge.
Differences in what way?
Well, it highlights why a one-size-fits-all management style just doesn't work. You need a more one-on-one approach.
Right.
Fairness isn't about treating everyone exactly the same. It's about avoiding bias based on stuff that's got nothing to do with the job,
Makes sense. Treating people based on their work, not other stuff.
Yeah.
What else is part of this nature of people?
Perception is another big one. How we uniquely see and interpret things.
Our own personal filter on the world.
Exactly. Think about Aman and Anamika watching a late-night party.
Okay.
Aman might think, oh, this is bad for young people. Anamika might see it as, like, prime social networking time. Same event. Totally different perceptions.
Yeah, I can see that. We definitely bring our own lens. What about the whole person idea?
Ah, yes. That means organizations don't just hire a skill set. They hire a whole person. Meaning our personal lives, emotions, family. It's all connected to our work life. You can't just, switch it off at the door. We're integrated beings.
Right. What happens at home doesn't just stay at home. It comes to work, too. Okay. And motivation. That's obviously key.
Definitely. Motivation is what drives us to act. OB often looks at two main types. Positive motivation.
The carrot.
Yeah, basically. Offering rewards like promotions or profit sharing. If you do this, you get this.
And the stick.
That's negative motivation, using force or warnings. If you don't do this, you lose out.
Got it. Carrot and stick, but maybe with more psychological underpinning.
Precisely. And the last part of the nature of people is the value of the person.
Feeling valued.
Right. People need to feel their skills are recognized, appreciated. They want opportunities to grow, to develop. When employees feel valued, they're more invested. Simple as that.
Yeah, being treated like a cog in the machine isn't exactly motivating. Okay, so that's the people side. What about the nature of organization?
So the nature of organization looks at the company's character, its purpose, the environment it creates. Three key things here: social system, mutual interest, and ethics.
Social system.
Yeah.
What does that look like practically?
Every organization is a social system. It interacts with other companies, customers, the community. Inside, people have different roles, statuses.
Right.
Their behavior is shaped by personal motives and group affiliations. You see formal systems like a project success party.
Okay.
And informal ones like colleagues grabbing lunch for someone's birthday. Both influence behavior.
Ah, the official stuff and the unofficial connections. Got it. And mutual interest.
That's the interdependence. Organizations need people, right? To function, achieve goals.
Sure.
And people need organizations for income, careers, purpose. It's a two-way street. Like a bank needs customers and customers need banking services. Mutual interest.
A win-win, ideally. And finally, ethics.
Yes, ethics. The moral principles guiding actions. It's becoming huge for attracting and keeping good people.
So companies are paying more attention.
Definitely. They're setting up codes of conduct, doing ethics training, sometimes even rewarding ethical behavior. It's not just about avoiding scandals. It's about building trust.
Setting the moral compass for the organization. Okay, so OB studies this interaction, but it seems like it borrows from lots of other areas, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's very much an applied behavioral science. It draws heavily from several disciplines.
Like what?
Well, the big five are probably psychology, social psychology, sociology, anthropology, and political science.
Okay, let's take those one by one. Psychology, how does that fit in?
Psychology is the science of individual behavior, measuring it, explaining it, sometimes changing it.
Right.
So for OB, it gives us insights into learning, personality, which we'll definitely get back to perception, how individuals make decisions, performance appraisals, attitudes, employee selection, work design, motivation, emotion, stress, job satisfaction, all that individual level stuff.
So really focused on the single person in the workplace context. How is social psychology different?
Social psychology is kind of the bridge between psychology and sociology. It looks at how people influence each other.
Interactions.
Exactly. How we think about and relate to others. So in OB, it helps understand attitude change, communication within groups, group decision-making, managing resistance to change. It's the individual within the social context of the organization.
The group effect. Okay. And then sociology.
Sociology takes an even broader view. It studies group behavior and social structures.
The bigger picture.
Yeah. It helps OB understand large-scale group dynamics, organizational culture, formal structures, technology's impact, bureaucracy, communication networks, power, conflict between groups, even how industrialization shaped work behavior.
Looking at the whole system and societal forces, anthropology seems a bit different, though. How does the study of humanity play in?
Anthropology brings the cultural lens. It studies people and their environment, how culture, shared ideas, symbols, language, beliefs, myths is created and passed on. So for OB, it's crucial for understanding different values, attitudes, doing cross-cultural analysis, and really appreciating the impact of the organizational environment and, critically, organizational culture.
Ah, seeing the organization as its own little culture. Interesting. Lastly, political science. How does that apply?
Political science studies power, politics, political systems. Since organizations usually have hierarchies.
Right, office politics.
Exactly. It helps us understand power dynamics, conflict resolution, how internal policies get made, how power is used or negotiated within those hierarchies.
Navigating the power structures. Wow, okay, so OB really pulls from a lot of different places.
Yep.
Let's switch gears a bit. How did OB itself come about? What's the history?
We can sort of track it through four main periods. First, the pre-scientific era, so before about 1880.
Okay.
Back then, organizations were often small, sometimes military-like. Authority wasn't really questioned. But then the Industrial Revolution happened.
Things got bigger, more complex.
Right. Factories grew. The old autocratic styles of early industrialists, think Ford, Carnegie, they worked for a bit, but weren't enough for these larger, more stable industrial settings. A new approach was needed.
So command and control wasn't cutting it anymore. What came next?
The classical era, roughly 1880 to 1930, this was all about efficiency and managing the work itself.
Getting things done faster, better.
Exactly. Two main streams here. First, scientific management, linked heavily with Frederick Taylor. Taylorism.
I've heard of that. Time and motion study.
It's that kind of thing, yeah. Analyzing workflows, standardizing procedures to boost productivity, replacing rule of thumb with science. Efficiency, standardization, discipline were key.
Sounds very mechanical.
It was. Taylor had principles like separating planning from doing, functional foremanship like having 8 bosses, work study, standard tools, scientific selection and training, financial incentives.
Did it work?
It often increased output, yeah. But the big criticism is that it really focused on the physical work, often ignoring the human element. People felt like machines.
Efficiency over well-being. What was the other stream in the classical era?
Administrative management, mostly associated with Henri Fayol. He focused less on the worker and more on the manager and the functions of management.
Or functions.
Planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. Fayol also talked about key business activities, technical, commercial, financial, etc., and managerial qualities.
So Taylor was down on the factory floor. Fayol was more in the manager's office, broadly speaking.
That's a decent way to put it, yeah. Then came the neoclassical era, about 1930 to 1950.
A reaction to the classical view.
Definitely. This era saw a big shift towards the human and behavioral side. You had the human relations school, Mayo, Rufflesberger, the Hawthorne studies.
Where they found that just paying attention to workers improved things.
Kind of, yeah. It highlighted social factors, employee needs, relationships. Then there was the behavioral management school, Maslow, with his hierarchy of needs, McGregor with theory X and theory Y.
Right, different views of what motivates people.
Exactly. This era really brought the people part back into focus.
Moving beyond just mechanics. And that brings us to the modern era.
Pretty much. From 1950 onwards. This era is much more integrated, thinking about organizations as complex social systems, decision theory, quantitative methods.
More sophisticated tool.
Yeah, and systems thinking, seeing how everything connects. Also, contingency approaches the idea that there's no one best way to manage. It depends on the situation.
Context matters.
Hugely. We also saw operations research, IT becoming a major force, contingency theory formalized, total quality management or TQM, re-engineering. It's a much more dynamic, holistic view now.
Wow, it really has evolved from simple efficiency to this complex web of people, systems, context. Okay, let's zoom back in on the individual. What key aspects does OB look at there?
Well, individual behavior is basically how we respond to stimuli, internal like emotions, or external from the environment.
How we act and react.
Right. A really core framework is B equals FPE. Behavior is a function of the person and the environment.
So who we are and where we are determines how we act.
Exactly. A normally calm person might act totally differently under extreme work pressure. Context changes behavior.
Okay. And what causes this behavior? What does OB look at?
Broadly, we talk about inherited characteristics, things we're born with, maybe temperament, physical traits, and learned characteristics.
Things we pick up.
Yeah, through experience, education. This includes our perception, values, personality, attitudes.
Personality feels like a big one. How does OB tackle that?
Personality is that unique, relatively stable set of psychological traits influencing how we think, feel, behave. It's what makes us, us.
And where does it come from?
It's complex, a mix of biology, genetics, environment, upbringing, life events, and social factors, culture, interaction.
Nature and nurture, basically.
Pretty much. And there are different theories trying to explain it. You've got psychodynamic like Freud, behavioral focusing on conditioning, humanistic like Maslow emphasizing self-growth.
Lots of angles.
Yeah, and trait theories like the Big Five. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. Those are really common in OB research. Plus, cognitive theories on thought processes and biological theories looking at genetics.
So the big five are key traits OB often uses.
They are. Understanding someone's profile on those dimensions can help predict, to some extent, how they might behave at work. Like, high conscientiousness often links to being organized and reliable.
Okay. And perception. We touched on it, but let's dive deeper.
Perception is how we organize and interpret sensory info, making sense of the world through our senses.
It's not just taking information in.
No, it's an active process, influenced by our differences, the context, our expectations, what we pay attention to, our emotions.
Wow, lots of filters.
Definitely. The stages are roughly sensation, raw input, attention focusing, organization, structuring it, and interpretation, assigning meaning. Because it's active, two people can perceive the exact same thing very differently.
We literally see things differently. What about perceptual selectivity?
That's our tendency to focus on some things and ignore others. We have limited attention, right? So we filter.
We have to, otherwise it's information overload.
Exactly. Theories like filter theory or spotlight models try to explain how we select what's relevant. It's useful for efficiency, but it means we can miss important stuff too.
Like blind spots.
Kind of, yeah. Advertisers know all about getting past our perceptual filters.
I bet. And perceptual organization.
That's about how we group sensory info into meaningful patterns, objects, shapes.
Making sense of the chaos.
Right. Gestalt psychology gave us principles for this. Proximity, grouping nearby things. Similarity, grouping alike things. Continuity, seeing smooth patterns. Closure, filling in gaps. Symmetry. Our brains automatically try to find order.
Constantly pattern matching. Now, how we perceive other people's social perception, that seems crucial for OB.
Absolutely critical. Social perception is how we form impressions and make judgments about others based on cues like facial expressions, body language, what they say.
Reading people.
Sort of. But it's heavily influenced by us, our biases, the context, our motives, expectations. Key ideas here are attribution theory.
Explaining behavior.
Yeah. Do we attribute it to their personality, internal, or the situation, external? Is it stable or temporary? And impression formation, first impressions, stereotypes, the halo effect.
Where one good trait makes us think everything about them is good.
Exactly. Or one bad trait taints everything. Social perception shapes relationships, team dynamics, leadership, everything involving interaction.
We're constantly judging, consciously or not, which leads to impression management.
Right. That's us trying to control how others see us.
Putting our best foot forward.
Yeah. Self-presentation, trying to be likable, ingratiation. It happens in job interviews, obviously, but also day to day. It can be genuine or manipulative. It's a big part of social life at work.
We're all managing our image to some extent. Okay, what about attitudes and values?
Attitudes are our evaluations positive, negative, neutral about people, things, ideas, shaped by experience, social norms, values. They can be explicit, we know we have them, or implicit unconscious biases.
And values, how are they different?
Values are more fundamental, core beliefs about what's right or desirable, broad guiding principles. They're usually deeper, more abstract, and more stable than attitudes.
So values underpin attitudes.
Often, yes, both influence behavior and shape group norms.
Got it. And finally, for individuals, learning and reinforcement.
Learning is acquiring new knowledge, skills, behaviors. OB looks at classical conditioning, associating stimuli. Operant conditioning, learning through consequences, rewards, punishments.
Like training a dog.
The principles are similar, yeah. And observational learning, watching and imitating others.
Learning by example.
Right. And reinforcement positive, giving something good. Negative, taking away something bad. Or punishment strengthens or weakens behavior. Understanding this is key for training, changing habits, encouraging desired actions at work.
Okay, so understanding all those individual pieces, personality, perception, attitudes, learning, builds the foundation. Now let's talk leadership. Big topic in OB.
Huge. Leadership in OB is basically about influencing, inspiring, guiding people towards a common goal. It's not just about having the title.
It's about the influence.
Exactly. And there are loads of theories trying to explain it.
Like what? What are the main ones?
Well, you have trait theory, early ideas about leaders being born with certain traits. Then behavioral theory, focusing on what leaders do, learnable skills.
Nature versus nurture again?
Kind of. Then situational theory, the best style depends on the context, the followers. Transformational theory, leaders inspiring with a vision. Servant leadership, putting followers' needs first. Authentic leadership, being genuine, self-aware. And leader-member exchange, or LMX, focusing on the quality of the leader-follower relationship.
Wow, lots of different takes. Is there a consensus on what makes a good leader, regardless of theory?
While context matters, some qualities pop up again and again. Having vision, integrity, empathy, good communication, decision-making skills, being adaptable, self-aware, empowering others, having a positive attitude, being accountable.
Sounds like a pretty solid list most people would agree on.
Generally, yes, these tend to be universally valued.
Okay, leadership is crucial, but organizations are made of groups, not just leaders and followers. What about group dynamics?
Group dynamics covers all the interactions, processes, behaviors within groups, how people communicate, influence each other, make decisions, work together.
The inner workings of a team.
Right. Key things are roles, formal and informal, norms, the unwritten rules, cohesion, how tightly knit the group is, communication patterns, conflict, which isn't always bad, and leadership within the group. Understanding this is vital for teamwork.
How do these groups even form?
Several models. Tuckman's stages are famous. Forming, getting acquainted, storming, conflict, jostling for position, norming, agreeing on rules, cohesion builds, and performing, working effectively.
Like stages of development for a group.
Exactly. Social identity theory suggests we form groups based on shared identity. And of course, shared interests, goals, or even external factors can bring people together.
What defines a group? Fundamentally, its nature.
Generally, two or more interacting people sharing a goal, seeing themselves as a unit. Key features are interdependence, shared norms, roles, communication, maybe cohesion, and power dynamics.
A mini social system. Why do people join them?
Lots of reasons. Need for connection, belonging, shared interests or goals easier to achieve together, learning, personal growth, sometimes status or recognition. We're a social animal.
Need the tribe. And what functions do groups serve inside an organization?
Oh, critical functions. Information sharing, bringing diverse knowledge together. Decision-making, problem-solving, leveraging collective brainpower.
Two heads are better than one.
Often, yeah. Also, innovation, social support for members, leadership development. Groups can achieve things individuals just can't.
Makes sense. Okay, shifting again, let's talk stress, something everyone deals with. How does OB look at stress management?
Stress management in OB is about the tools and strategies, individual and organizational, to reduce stress and its negative impacts.
And stress itself.
It's a normal reaction to demands or changes that feel overwhelming. Physical, emotional, intellectual responses. Important distinction. Eustress is positive, motivating stress.
Like a challenging project.
Exactly. Distress is the negative kind, harmful stress. And we have the fight or flight response initially.
That adrenaline surge.
Right. And long-term, there's the general adaptation syndrome, GAS, alarm, initial shock, Resistance, coping, and exhaustion, resources depleted, shows the danger of chronic stress.
Where does workplace stress usually come from?
Lots of places. Individual factors matter, family, finances, personality. But organizational factors are huge.
Like what?
Task demands workload, deadlines, unclear roles. Interpersonal demands conflict, lack of support. Organizational structure, lack of participation. Leadership style, too much pressure, tension. Even the organization's life stage growth or decline can be stressful.
And external factors too.
Yeah, environmental stuff like the economy, political instability, technological change-making skills, obsolete.
So stress can come from anywhere. Do we all react the same way?
Not at all. Big individual differences. How we perceive the situation, threat, or challenge. Job experience helps. Social support is a massive buffer. Locus of control, do we feel in control? Self-efficacy, belief in our abilities, even hostility levels impact it.
So it's very personal. What are the downsides of too much stress for the person in the company?
For the individual, poor time management, feeling overwhelmed, strained relationships, lack of focus, more errors, health problems, headaches, sleep issues, worse, lack of energy, constant worry, reduced creativity, irritability, anger, burnout.
Sounds grim. And for the organization?
It adds up. Lower productivity, more absenteeism, higher turnover, tardiness, poor teamwork, lower quality work, higher healthcare costs.
Stress is expensive for companies.
Clearly something organizations need to manage. What can they do? What coping strategies work? Organizational strategies are key. Leadership needs to set the tone. Promote work-life balance, communicate openly, show appreciation, respect off hours.
Lead by example.
Exactly. Effective work delegation, fair workloads, involving employees in planning, providing resources, that all helps.
Makes sense.
Flexible work options, flex time, remote work give people control. Even the physical workspace matters. Quiet areas, relaxation zones.
Different spaces for different needs.
Right. And comprehensive wellness programs addressing diet, exercise, mental health, finances, stress reduction tools, a holistic approach.
So creating a supportive culture and providing resources.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, closely related is organizational change. Organizations don't stand still.
Never. Change is constant. New leadership, new tech, new strategies. OB looks at organizational change management, how to handle these transitions effectively.
Are there different kinds of change?
Yeah, broadly adaptive change, small incremental tweaks like an OS upgrade. And transformational change, big fundamental shifts in mission, strategy, structure, people, like adopting a whole new CRM system.
Yeah. Much bigger impact. Is there a typical process for managing change?
Lewin's three-phase model is classic. Unfreezing,
Right.
realizing the old way isn't working, creating motivation to change.
Taking things up.
Kind of, then changing. Learning the new ways, new behaviors, processes, attitudes, through training, modeling.
The transition phase.
Right. And finally, refreezing. Making the new way stick, reinforcing it so it becomes the new normal.
But people often resist change, don't they? Why?
Oh, yeah. Resistance is common. Individually, people might fear economic loss, job security, skills becoming obsolete. Personal reasons, comfort with the status quo, fear of the unknown, ego. Social reasons, disruption to work groups, peer pressure.
Understandable fears. How can organizations overcome that resistance?
Communication is huge. Educate people on why the change is needed, the benefits, get employee input, involve them in the planning.
Make them part of it.
Exactly. Negotiate agreements, provide support resources, training, communicate clearly and often, and measure how it's going. Adjust as needed.
Sounds like involving people and supporting them is key. What about organizational development, OD? How's that different from just managing change?
OD is more like a planned, organization-wide effort to improve effectiveness and health through planned interventions, often using behavioral science knowledge.
More strategic and ongoing.
Yeah, often focused on things like communication, structure, culture. It anticipates change by studying behavior. Benefits include continuous improvement, better communication, employee growth, maybe better product services, increased profits.
How does OD work in practice? What's the process?
Often uses an action research model. It's cyclical. Starts with diagnosing the problem, then gathering data, getting feedback.
Finding out what's really going on.
Right. Then planning an intervention, implementing it, and crucially evaluating if it worked. If yes, sustain the change and keep monitoring. It's about continuous learning and adapting for the whole organization.
A constant improvement cycle. Okay, final big area, the international dimension. OB isn't just domestic anymore.
Absolutely not. As companies go global, understanding international OB is critical. Managers have to navigate diverse social, political, economic environments.
And different people.
Exactly. Huge differences across cultures in things like individualism versus collectivism, power distance, how accepting people are of hierarchy, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity, femininity values.
So what works in one country might bomb in another.
Definitely. Leadership styles often don't transfer well. Even basic things like how you push for productivity can clash with local norms.
What are some key areas where this plays out?
Equal employment opportunity, EEO. The idea of fair treatment is global, but the specifics of what's discriminatory, the laws, they vary hugely. Getting EEO right globally boosts recruitment, customer satisfaction, engagement.
Makes sense. And organizational culture.
Culture becomes way more complex internationally. The shared values, expectations, practices, they clash or need translation across borders. Building a positive culture is always the goal, but what that looks like varies.
You mentioned Occupace culture before. Does that apply here?
It does. Occupace openness, confrontation, trust, authenticity, proaction, autonomy, collaboration. Experimenting these are generally good cultural traits.
Right.
But how they're expressed or valued can differ culturally. How directly do you confront problems? How much autonomy is expected or comfortable? You need to understand the local nuance for each of those dimensions.
So adapt the principles to the local context. What are some common challenges in managing diverse global teams?
Communication styles are a big one. Directness, nonverbal cues, how you deliver bad news. Team-building approaches differ individualistic versus cooperative cultures. Views on time, work-life balance, deadlines, even scheduling around different holidays. Cultural competence is non-negotiable for global managers.
Need that cultural intelligence.
Yeah.
Lastly, the idea of a learning organization. Why is that important globally?
A learning organization actively creates its future, constantly learns, adapts, empowers employees, breaks down barriers to knowledge.
It sounds ideal.
In a complex, fast-changing global market, this ability to learn and adapt is vital for survival, let alone success. Senja's 5 disciplines, systems thinking, personal mastery, mental models, shared vision, team learning provide a framework for building this capability, which is crucial when dealing with global complexity.
Wow. Okay, this has been a really thorough walkthrough of organizational behavior. It's definitely a complex field.
It really is. Lots of moving parts, connecting the individual to the group to the whole organization, and now even across the globe.
But understanding these core ideas, individual differences, groups, leadership, stress, change, culture, it really does give you a framework for understanding what makes organizations tick, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's not just theory for academics. It has real practical implications for how well people work together, how effective teams are, how healthy organizations are. It helps make sense of the human side of work.
So it's a shortcut, in a way, to understanding those crucial dynamics without having to read all the textbooks yourself.
That's the idea, giving you the essential toolkit.
Okay, final thought then. We've talked about individuals, groups, culture, leadership, all these interacting pieces. If you had to pick one, what single aspect do you think has the most significant impact on whether an organization can really thrive in today's world?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Putting me on the spot. They're all so interconnected, but maybe organizational culture, because it shapes so much else, how people interact, how change is handled, what kind of leadership emerges.
Interesting. Definitely something for our listeners to chew on. How do these pieces fit together in their experience?
Exactly. It's worth reflecting on, and hopefully this gives people a good foundation to keep exploring OB concepts.
Well, thanks so much for breaking all that down for us, and thanks to everyone for joining us on the Deep Dive.
My pleasure.
We hope this gives you a solid grasp of organizational behavior. Until next time, keep learning.